success. Success is I had a really fun time at the football game, or I had this great other thing. And for me, there's a bigger picture. I'm not here just to enjoy my Friday nights. I'm here to make a dent on the planet. I'm here to serve humanity at the highest level I can without regret. And that means some of it is going to be painful. Some of it's going to hurt. Some of it's not going to be very passionate, but there's deep purpose, which feeds my soul.
Welcome to The Path to Wealth, the show about well-being, fulfillment, and financial freedom. And I'm your host, Hennche. Welcome to The Path to Wealth. I'm your host, Hennche. Today we welcome Damion Lupo, a seasoned entrepreneur who has grown dozens of companies from $0 to $100 million in 25 years. He has authored 12 books and built multiple companies reaching 7, 8, and 9-figure valuations. Despite losing $20 million portfolio at age 30, Damion overcame homelessness and rebuilt his wealth beyond 9 figures. Now he's revolutionizing retirement plans and transforming home and apartment construction with Frametec. Thank you for joining us today, Damion.
All right, perfect. I'm ready to rock.
First things first, where does your money mindset stem from?
I think that when I look back 40 years ago when I was a kid, there was this constant barrage of scarcity that was hitting me from my parents, telling me that we didn't have anything, that we didn't have any money, that we were broke and we couldn't do things. And I think a lot of people submit to whatever they're told by their parents and they don't fight it. But there was something in me that pushed back and didn't believe it. So I started creating, and there was like entrepreneurs have a natural tendency and propensity for creating things and solving problems. So my mindset was starting there, fighting against the system, if you will. And then over time, I just kept trying things. And ultimately, the money mindset is it's pretty static. You have to go and really massage it and work on it. Like the personal development people do is the hardest work you ever do. And that just ended up being a process of trying things and them failing over and over. Like I've started 70 plus companies. Most of them were learning opportunities, and my money mindset kept evolving because I would go through them and learn how to make 10,000 and then lose 10,000, then make 100,000, then lose 100,000. And that process expanded me to a place where now I'm working and building a company that's worth $500 million and was started 2 years ago. That would have never happened if my money mindset had been what it was 10 years ago, because it wasn't expanded enough.
What did that look like, that internal dialogue? So one, you mentioned it's a system. And by that, I think you meant a belief system, right? It's like the money mindset that people carry is their belief system around it. Like what gave you the confidence to go on and on and on after failure? And, there's win and failure and win and failure, and like to eventually just push through it, and that there wasn't a valley of despair that really took you out, because you did have some major losses too. And you could have also just been like, okay, this whole entrepreneurship, this is not for me. I just got to go back and get a job somewhere.
And I think that's what most people do. They try something and then they say, I can't handle it. And it's partly because it's painful, and partly there's judgment. So we have judgment. A lot of that happens from families, from our spouses, from society. We have this happens a lot in the South, where people are really concerned about what other people think about them. But truly, our entire system is set up as our kids. We're judged if we get 50% wrong as kids in school. We're a failure, and so we build that muscle and that muscle memory around the pain that's involved in the judgment. A mentor of mine about 20 years ago said to me, he said, "You have no idea how powerful you'll become and how free you'll be when you get to a point where you stop caring what anybody thinks about you." And it was really, really powerful. It's very rare. People, they have an internal perspective on what are people thinking about me. The truth is nobody's really thinking about you that much. They're thinking about themselves. And so every time I would lose money, one of the things was, wow, that didn't kill me. There's this lesson you learn when you lose and you go, oh, that was a learning opportunity. The moment you switch from loser to learner, everything changes, because then you're like, well, how fast can I learn new things? So at that point, you're almost taking the seatbelt off or the brakes off. You just go and you make decisions quickly. Most people are so concerned about the consequences of making a mistake and maybe losing money or losing face or being shamed that they try to avoid it at all costs, which means they're really they're keeping the brakes on it all the time, because they don't want to slide off the road. And I think that that's the difference when you let go of that and you realize this isn't going to kill me. No matter what happens, nothing is going to eat me. Like there's no dinosaur in the bushes or some saber-toothed tiger that's going to come and maul me. And that's the big difference when you let go of that, when you actually trust that. And you need to have some lessons that result in some losses and some pain so that you have the experience, because otherwise the imagination is so painful, it's so scary. The boogeyman is always out there. You go through a few times where the boogeyman has come across your in front of you and you realize, oh, that actually isn't that bad. And so you stop worrying about it, but you have to go through it. If it's in your head, it's always going to be the thing that freaks you out and keeps you from moving forward.
What was the biggest boogeyman for you in the early stage?
In the beginning, there was a lot of pressure from what other people, my parents and friends, thought I should be doing. And I think that's pretty consistent, especially when you're in your 20s. But it lasted into my 30s easily, because I left college. I got thrown out of college because I started a bookstore on campus, and I put the other bookstore out of business. And they said, you have to leave because we don't like you can't have a business in your dorm room. So I was always doing things that were different, starting businesses, but I also had the judgment. It was like this boogeyman. It was like this noose around my neck that it was always, man, I got to deal with my parents saying, why aren't you going back to college? I've got to deal with people thinking I'm crazy. And ultimately I had to make a choice that I had a different path, and then accepting it and then embracing it and then saying, all right, this is my path. Let's effing go. And I think that it was just an internal decision. And then acknowledging that most people would not understand that. And what's really cool is once I made that decision, all of a sudden I found other people that were crazy like me. And so then all of a sudden I'm not alone, but I had to make that decision. And then these mysterious other unicorns are out there, and we found each other.
Yeah, it's like you have to show colors in order so that other people can identify you. Like if you always try to conform, then you also don't show the other unicorn, hey, like we're like.
I think that's exactly right. People that don't stand for something stand for nothing. And when you don't acknowledge, like when I ask people constantly, I'm asking people what they're involved in, what they do, and they tell me everything under the sun. I've got these 15 different businesses, and I'm doing this side hustle, and I've got this real estate investment. And I was like, I look at them and I go, you have no idea. You're not focused. You're all over the place. I don't even really know who you are, what you're about. And then I'll bump into somebody and they're doing one thing and they're obsessed about it. And that's exciting. And then I go, ooh, you're my kind of person. They're also the kind of person that's going to not only succeed, but be deeply fulfilled because they're going deep into something. I don't know that I've ever seen anybody that had 15 different things going on that was really that fulfilled. I mean, my dad was one of those. He knew a lot about, or a little about a lot of things. And he went very, very wide and didn't go very deep. So he could talk about a lot of things and he had a lot of interests, but it was never very interesting to go and explore things or be like, I never got really excited about what he was doing because it changed every week. And I see a lot of people like that. They're like drunk squirrels. They just chase shiny objects everywhere. And it's easy now because there's shiny objects all over the internet. So everybody's just chasing them and scrolling and people wonder what happened. Like years go by and nothing's really changed.
Yeah, because if you go a mile wide and an inch deep, as they say, you never really penetrate anything. And even if you have maybe a piece of land where you could possibly hit gold, you never got to the gold because you only go an inch deep.
That reminds me of the of Acres of Diamonds, the book that talks about that. Like when people just scratch the surface, then they go, well, there must be a different place. I better go somewhere else. And ultimately they never get anywhere. And then they keep chasing and they keep moving around. They keep looking for the answers, but the answers are right inside them.
But one could also say you having so many companies that you started and kind of you did many different ventures, that is kind of maybe the trial period it takes to get to, this is where I really want to put my effort. This is where I dial in. It's kind of like I have to F around to find what I really want to pursue.
That's exactly what it is. And what's interesting is it took all those things to get to the point where I realized I had to pick and go deep. And it wasn't that I had to do 69 things that weren't the right thing. I had to do enough things to where I understood I needed to focus on one thing. There's a great book by Gary Keller called The One Thing. And when you focus on that one thing, it's kind of like trying to date 15 people at once. Really doesn't work very well. You're not going to go very deep. And when you're dating a lot of different businesses, it's the same thing. So once you go into that one thing, the truth is you can create whatever type of wealth, whatever type of success in any business. Doesn't matter what it is. There's $1 billion that's been made in everything from pencils to planes. And so once you're mature enough and you've got the experience to understand that, and then you say, okay, I'm going to drill into this one thing, then all sorts of magic happens. It's providence happens when commitment is made. But unfortunately, everybody's got a backup plan. And so they're like half in, half out. And you know what? Everybody knows that. They know when your heart's not in something. They know when you're just there, or you're there at 8 to 5, or you're there when it's convenient, or you're managing it, but you've got this other thing. What's really cool is when people say, this is my heart, my passion. I can't stop thinking about it 24/7. I'm obsessed about it. And that lasts more than a week. Like we've all heard of people that get really excited, and literally the next week or the next month, they're totally excited about something completely different. And you go, all right, what is it this time? This is not very exciting, because you're not really making any progress. You're just looking for what feels good. We're driven by our emotions. We're like a bunch of reptilians. We just like reptiles, our brain, whatever feels good in the moment. And then we get bored. And so that doesn't really get us anywhere. And unfortunately, it's very unfulfilling to do that, because we feel lost. We're always chasing the shiny object.
It's so interesting. There seem to be two popular schools of thought. Like there is the Steve Jobs who say, pursue your passion. And then there is other business advice where it's like, don't pursue your passion, go somewhere where you can be successful and then you make some money and then you pursue your passion. But do you think passion is the component that nurtures the discipline of commitment and focus? Or do you think you just have to brute force focus and commitment?
I think passion is the wrong P. I think purpose is the right P. And when you have deep purpose, because what happens is people say, well, my passion is this, and they love it and they get excited, and then it gets hard and they go, oh, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do the hard part of this. When you have purpose, when there's a mission behind what you're all about, then you go, okay, the purpose is this. It's to serve other people. And I resonate with that. It doesn't mean it's always going to be fun or easy, but you do it. When I hear people talk about passion, it's like, I want to just eat ice cream sundaes all the time. And I'm passionate about that. And I go, all right, so that's not really great. Also, the market doesn't care what you're passionate about. The market cares about purpose and solving problems. And so I love Steve Jobs and what he was all about. And he did make he made a comment that I thought was really valuable. He said, if there's too many days that go by in a row where I'm not happy, or I'm miserable, or I don't feel good, then I probably need to change something. And I agree with that. There's a certain threshold where you don't want to spend 10 years just struggling and being miserable. But at the same time, I've done plenty of things with my ventures that I have going on that have been hard, where I've worked weekends, where I'm not Mr. Fun Guy. I'm Mr. Guy that's studying Friday nights until 11 o'clock at night, and I'm working and I'm grinding. Does that sound very passionate? There's purpose behind it, but I had other passions that would have been a lot more fun, but there's a deep fulfillment, and there's a significance with that, not just a success. Success is, I had a really fun time at the football game, or I had this great other thing. And for me, there's a bigger picture. I'm not here just to enjoy my Friday nights. I'm here to make a dent on the planet. I'm here to serve humanity at the highest level I can without regret. And that means some of it is going to be painful. Some of it's going to hurt. Some of it's not going to be very passionate, but there's deep purpose, which feeds my soul.
Mm-hmm. And I think making housing more affordable fits right in that. Like that is a true dent you can make, because if you can take Frametec to a certain scale, that will certainly drive the affordability of housing.
Yeah, there's a huge problem. The problem is there's missing housing. And when you have missing housing, it puts pressure on prices. It makes it harder for people to be able to get into homes. And it's hard on the system. In America, we've got between 5 and 10 million missing housing units of houses and apartments. And so when a couple of years ago, when I had the guys that are my operating partners, when they shared the vision for what they wanted to do to help solve that problem, it gave me tingles. I was like, this is really cool. This is not an incremental 5% improvement on the system. This is an exponential 10 times improvement across the board. I mean, we do things literally 5 times faster with 99% less waste when we're building these houses, the framing on them. I was like, this is like a game changer for the whole world. And so there's deep purpose there, because we have a mission to solve the problem that's impacting everybody. So that got me fired up, like in a way that I've never been fired up. And not just because of the mission, but because there's all these people that are all rowing in the same direction, that are all fired up about the same thing. So It's like when you have multiple people that have that much energy, you can't help but to blow through any problems that you have. And that's exactly what's happened.
Yeah, yesterday I read a quote on X. The whoever is the Ford of housing will be the next trillionaire, and it is about creating affordable housing in that sense that you can manufacture it on a scale where everybody can have that affordable home. But then at the same time, the way the real estate community looks at it, it is so spread out and so local. And even if I look at Frametech, I see that you have to build literally multiple factories in the major markets. And those are each individual big ventures in each demographic. And you're still not reaching other certain areas because of that. Do you think in terms of scalability, you can truly get to the scale of, for example, to live up to a quote like that, where somebody can become the Ford of housing?
Well, I think one of the things that Ford did, it wasn't just Ford. He had a different model that other people followed, and so the impact that Henry Ford had on the whole system was not just from the Model T. It was all the other stuff, all the other different companies and the people that said that's a completely better way to do things. And that's what Frametech is doing. We're gonna solve part of the problem, but what's really cool is we're changing the culture of construction, and we're creating a culture inside of business that's very different, that's not seen today. And so I think that it does have the scalability to ripple across the world in a massive way. Ultimately, I think that we'll end up touching about 80 to 100 million people. Our vision for our rollout, that's how many people will touch our plants. The 5 locations that we have in mind for our rollout across the country. Is that the world? No, there's 8 billion people. So there's 100 times more people than we are going to touch directly, but indirectly, because of what we're building, I believe that a lot of other people are going to be inspired, and a lot of other businesses are going to massively change how they're operating because of what we're doing. And they're going to see a better way to do it. And they're going to say, it's time. And it's not crazy. They're actually doing it. We can do it too. That's how we actually impact the whole world. That's how we scale this thing. It's not by building 1,000 plants. I don't think that that's happening. What I think is that we're going to disrupt society because of the leadership, the way that we're operating business.
Do you feel a little bit inspired by how Elon and Tesla operates, in the sense that they build a different machine that is able to build cars on a different scale, on a different cost efficiency? And this is the true innovation of Tesla, is the manufacturing process more than the car. The car is also innovation, but the true innovation is the manufacturing part, which is what most people don't look at. Like the Germans weren't able to actually build these kind of factories the way that Tesla did.
I think that Elon has it exactly right. It's innovating the entire process, and it's first thinking, it's first principles, where you're not just trying to tweak something or twist something a little bit harder or softer. You're literally going to the base. And like when he said we're going to do something, whether it's SpaceX or Tesla, he said, okay, this system doesn't really work the way it's being done. So instead of taking the legacy thinking or the legacy system, he said, all right, let's imagine. And that's what we did here. The innovation is really about innovating a completely different way for the production. Like we have patented processes that change how things are built inside of a system that is scalable and doesn't rely on destroying humans, which is what happens with a lot of house building. It literally destroys the people that are in the process of swinging hammers. And so it is about reimagining how things are manufactured. I mean, our plants with Frametech are going to be the most sophisticated, advanced manufacturing plants for housing in America. And that's something that people can say, okay, how can we do something in our space, whether it's 3D printing or manufactured housing? There's a lot of different types of solutions that can take these processes, these baseline processes, and then run with them in their own way. So I think this really does fall in line with a very similar path to what Elon did. I think that's really exactly what we're doing.
I actually saw some 3D printed houses this week this is a project out of Eastern Europe, and I thought they looked quite neat. Like I actually liked the layering and the way they were. I always thought of 3D printed. I'm like, I don't know what this is gonna look like, but in that particular case, I'm like, I wouldn't feel offended if that was my house, you know. And I think they were able to print it in 5 days, at least the concrete part, and then obviously you have to go in with the team and connect the rest of it.
What's really cool is to see all those different innovations that are happening. People will often ask, well, who are Frametech's competitors? And you know, who are you competing with? And I laugh and I go, nobody. We're competing with the problem. Our job is to be part of the solution. And this problem is so big that we could use all the people, all the different innovators, all the businesses that want to step into this. There is no competition. What we're doing is we're collaborating. Just like I don't think he's competing. I think he's literally working on a solution that will help drive other innovators and other businesses to do similar things. And there's a bigger mission. It's not like we're going to win and beat everybody. He's beating the problem. And that's the same way we look at it. So I love the stuff that I see with 3D printing and the tiny houses and like all the things, the innovation all over the world. I think we can all learn from that. And it's pretty small thinking. You asked about money mindset in the beginning of this conversation. And really, this is about abundance. It's people talk about abundance and then they actually act and they live it. And this is a great example of that. We don't look at somebody and go, oh, if we're doing business, it's going to take away from somebody else. There's so much opportunity to create solutions. Pinheads think about a limited amount of resources. It's Malthusian economics. It's really dumb. And the reality is we live in an abundant universe. And when you buy into that, you stop competing and you start collaborating and all sorts of magic happens.
Yeah. Funny enough, just very timely, yesterday Naval posted that we've actually never run out of a single resource in like the history of the country, or maybe even the world. That this is an idea that we run out of things, but we don't really run out of things. Like we become innovative and we just see differently and we create new opportunity and we use things that we already had differently. And it's really the technology that pulls us forward.
I think that's fascinating and people don't realize that there's a lot of scare tactics to say that we're going to be out of this thing but what really and truly the facts tell a different story, that we are innovative. We're humans. We aren't animals that live just in the present. Sometimes I think we should be more present and not future thinking, but humans are creative. And what's really cool is we're at a time in history where billions more people are coming into this network to collaborate together. So there's really nothing that we can't solve together. And I think that that's one of the dumbest things about people that think war is a good idea. The war doesn't solve anything. It's literally like breaking things apart instead of coming together. There's nothing. I mean, Buckminster Fuller talked about this a lot when he did his work on thinking about how everything it works with the universe and with solar and these different, he had a different way of looking at things. It was very cooperative. It was very expansive. And he wouldn't say, well, we're going to run out of something. He was 100 years ahead of his time. There is no limit to the resources and the human ingenuity. And that's the thing. Even if we did, let's say we ran out of oil. And the funny part is every time somebody says we're out of oil or it's going to be 5 years, innovation technology changes it. We do all sorts of new things with directional drilling or whatever you want to talk about the resources. And it's really sad when people say that there's a limit. I just think that they're misguided and they have inappropriate thinking, that there is really no limit to what we can create and manifest when we come together. There's a very, very hard limit when we fight, because then we start talking about a finite amount of resources. And that's what a lot of the wars have been around. People thinking that there's some type of finite amount of anything, instead of saying, no, there's truly abundance. But you get small-minded people that have big guns and they do dumb things.
And I think the fact is we've never lived in a more widely abundant lifestyle. Like even if something you consider the second world, or if you see the living standards that have been distributed around the world, even on a medical standard, it's actually better than John D. Rockefeller's medical standard, his last 2 decades of his life, and he was the world's richest man.
It is kind of funny when you look back, the people that the modern day normal, even people that are homeless have cell phones and they have the whole world's information and the ability to do things. And you look at Rockefeller or Carnegie or Morgan or these people, these titans 100 years ago, and it was a pretty big deal for them to have indoor plumbing. And now it's like all these things are normalized. So when you look macro, and Peter Diamandis talks about this a lot, when you look really macroscopically on the planet and where we are in history, it's the safest time, it's the most abundant time. And yet we're told that it's the scariest time and the most death and the most mayhem. And the stats and the reality is really not. It doesn't support that narrative, but that narrative is where people stay because their reticular activator gets all triggered and their amygdala goes bananas, and they end up like reptiles. They're chasing all the fear and letting that drive them instead of looking at the facts. The facts are, this is the best time in history to be alive.
Yeah, absolutely. But the thing is that the same technology amplifies that reptilian brain so much more if people don't take charge of it. And I think that's also part of the problem, is that people kind of gave up on the responsibility of thought and action. And it's very easy to say it's the government fault or someone else should be responsible for my prosperity. And sometimes I think it's really funny. Like if I think about retirement and the way things are structured, Like even a minimum wage worker can use a Roth IRA and become a millionaire by retirement age, but nobody is doing it. And then whose fault is it? Like, oh, it's the system's fault? Well, I think everybody who actually educates themselves about the system becomes wealthy.
There's no doubt. And I'm talking about the only reason for 99% of the population that people are not wealthy or not financially free is because they make short-term hand-to-mouth decisions about what feels good. They don't want to take any pain. They don't want to struggle. And the reality is, I mean, your life is your own damn fault. And there's a guy named Larry Winget that wrote a bunch of books. One of them is called Shut Up, Stop Whining, Get a Life. Like truly, we have a nation of whiners and complainers and victims. And the people that are out there creating wealth, not everybody that has a lot of wealth, when we talk about money, has inherited it or somehow won the lottery. I mean, there's people, most of the people that have wealth have gone out there and created something. Why are people trying to get into America? Why have they been doing that for decades and decades? Because there's an opportunity here. Now, there's a lot of places in the world where you're pretty stuck. And I mean, I've been to a lot of places firsthand where it is hard. You could have all the innovation tendency you wanted, but it's brutal. In this country, when people say, man, it's hard and I'm not getting anywhere and I don't have any money when I retire, or I'm retired and I'm stuck, I don't have a whole lot of sympathy, because people are a reflection. Their lives are a reflection of their choices, their habits, their behaviors, and their value systems. And we have free will. So victims really don't, I can't really handle victims very well. When people say, well, it was Joe Biden's fault, or it was Donald Trump's fault, or it was some idiot in the news, it was their fault. I'm like, no, it's your fault. There's nobody that is responsible for your life except for you, period. And I don't care what's happened. The most tragic things that happen to people, still, we get to choose how we react to it and what we do next. And yet people will hold these weights of their past, that somebody did something and they were wronged. I've watched people that got fired from a job and they spent 3, 4, 5 years in lawsuits with their previous employer because they were wronged. And I'm thinking, you are dumb. You just gave up a half a decade of your life for what? So you could be righteous? I mean, you're still half a decade later, and you just wasted it and you can't get that back. So being a victim is expensive and it's really deadly.
Oh, being a victim is expensive and deadly. And I think it's true. Like I've went through the medical system with a couple of surgeries, and I realized that if you don't educate yourself, if you don't seek out the right kind of care, if you don't make a point of who you want to be taken care by, you'll be just flushed through the system. But it's ultimately your fault.
That's it. There is nobody else. The other one is people like to blame their parents. That's, you go to Dr. Phil or you go to the therapist, and the therapist says, well, tell me about your parents and how did they mess you up? I mean, everybody's parents messes them up. And I mean, occasionally somebody has the perfect childhood in their mind, but the reality is parents are making it up the way they go. And it's not your parents' fault. They're human too. And so like, I think people really get that when they have kids. They're like, oh man, my parents were doing the best they could. So it's ultimately the cool part is when you say, okay, it's my life, it's up to me, I'm not going to be a victim. All of a sudden you own your life. Like you can make decisions when you say, well, I'm just going to wait to see what happens, or I'm going to blame somebody. You are powerless. You've literally given up all control, all power, and you're stuck. And so, yeah, your life is going to suck. The moment you say it's my life, it's up to me, holy crap. Like what you can do is limitless.
Yeah, I align with that. And how do you struck a balance there? Because that could also become a very cocky attitude.
Yeah.
Like where does the healthy component that doesn't make us antisocial come in?
Sometimes you're going to have an edge. I mean, if you ask an Olympian that's a gold medalist, are they going to be the most gentle, laid back, unassuming person? Probably not. I mean, maybe, but the reality is when people are out there being obsessed, if you go and hang out with Elon, which I have not, I don't think you're going to say, wow, he seems like a really balanced guy. He spends 4 hours in each day doing all these different things. No, he's literally around the clock thinking about things, sleeping on his couch at his office, literally in an RV at Tesla in Austin, Texas. Like this is what he does. So people try to think about how they're going to have balance in their life. I look at things more like having harmony and being in seasons. And it's, so I've been way out of balance for most of my life in different areas. And so you just have to decide, okay, what is the priority? And then you focus on that. And then things that are not the highest priority get less and less energy and they get the leftovers. But to say, I'm going to have the different parts of my life, the faith, the family, the friends, the fitness, I'm going to have equal amount of energy to all these things. It's like, all right, you're going to have a very average life and it's going to probably be really not very exciting. I think it's more exciting to say, I'm going to be obsessed about something and it doesn't keep me in balance. And I'm good with that. Is there an edge? Yeah, it's going to, Some people are going to, there's, when you have an obsession or you're really hyper, you really are into something, you're going to look a little bit crazy and you're definitely going to look arrogant. You're going to have people going, man, you're like wacko. That happens. And it's not for everybody. Some people, most people would say, I don't want that. I want to have people like me. I don't care if people like me. They're going to respect that I'm true and honest and legit. I am
Mhm.
me. I'm not trying to be somebody else. I'm not trying to be an elephant. I think nowadays you can actually be a cat or a dog or an elephant. You can identify as that. I don't get what's happening with people, but I identify as me. That's my pronouns are me is me. And so I think that the more people that do that, the more society gets better because we don't have people lying to themselves and other people. And I think most people are doing that to certain degrees.
Earlier you said something that if people beat themselves up half of the time, if they're doing something wrong, it doesn't really work in their favor. And yesterday I saw the commencement speech from Roger Federer, and he said that he missed 47% of the points he didn't make. So he only won 53% of the points in the games, which as an outcome, he's one of the best players in the world, but he still lost 47% of the points over all of his games. And he said that every point you want to approach, like it's the most important thing in the world, but the minute or the second rather, you lose it, it's behind. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You just leave it behind, and the next one right in front of you is the next most important shot of your life, you know. And he said that's how you have to approach it.
I think it's totally right. I think being super present and focused there like LeBron has talked about this. And he said when he goes out there, win or lose, he's given everything. Same with Kobe and all these like super basketball players. Everybody at an elite level of sports or business, that's how they play. They go out there and they give it all. And you win or you lose. One thing happens. It's one or the other. And you just move on to the next thing. If you win, it's cool. And then you keep training for the next thing. Like you don't get stuck in that thing. Unfortunately, what most people do is they say, well, if this one thing happens, if I win the big game, if I win the money, if I make the money, if I get to retire, then I'll be happy. Then, and it's like you have that moment in time, and then guess what? Okay, now what? And so people get stuck on that success moment, and it's not about that. It's about the fulfillment, the significance of going through and being completely present and all in. And to your point, yeah, you can literally have 50% right or 50% lost and be in that space of super, super joy and happiness and significance. We're not taught that though. You have to go do something different. People watch all these sports players and they watch people, whether it's Oprah or Elon, and they say, oh, they're so amazing. How many things have they screwed up? A ton. But yet we look at all their successes, or we look at online and we see people's success reels and we go, look, their lives are amazing. No, those are the highlight reels. You're missing all the trauma and all the drama and all the pain. And we somehow we think that that's not true, and that's just part of the process. And when you embrace that, it's very, very cool. Like I think about Michael Phelps and all the gold medals that he won, or Simone Biles and all the world championships that she's had and continues to have. Did they win everything? No, they lost a ton. They had pain and trauma and injuries and everything else. There's a healthy obsession. And I think that for whatever that is for you, for people we all have something. And I think we tend to hesitate, and we live a life of quiet desperation, tiptoeing safely to death's door. And then we get there and we realize, oh, damn, we meet the person that we could have been. And then we have this moment of regret, and that's hell on earth. But there's an alternative, and that's being all in on your life, whatever that life is for you.
And kind of tying it back into what you said earlier, whatever that is for you is simply your decision. It's like pick something, focus on it, and put yourself behind it. And then by the sheer commitment, that will potentially lead to more fulfillment.
It does, because providence happens. I mean, all sorts of divine intervention happens when you absolutely commit. Resources, people, things happen, and you couldn't predict that. If you can't get that unless you're committed. I see people that are not really committed. They're just going along, waiting for life to happen, and nothing really gets on their train. They just wonder why it's so hard. But once you're totally committed, all sorts of magic happens. And I just know that to be a fact. It's true for me, and it's true for anybody that's gotten hyper committed and focused on anything.
Who has been like one of the influential figures in your journey, whether you met them in person or not, it's come out of a book or it's been a personal mentor of yours?
One of the things that I started doing about 25 years ago was going deep into personal development, because I didn't have anybody around me that was like me. They were all, I mean, the people that were around me at that time were people that were doing sort of normal things. And I was not, I was an alien. So I started spending time, like my friends were Jim Rohn and Tony Robbins and Zig Ziglar and all these people that are the OGs, the old guys of personal development. And I just listened to them and I brainwashed myself into a state of prosperity and abundance. And that became my belief system. So then I started when you're around somebody, whether it's a tape or a CD or your neighbor or your spouse, you're going to start talking like them. You're going to start being like them. It's just osmosis. It's what happens. And so I absorbed all those people. There were, and I mean, Brian Tracy, I burned the tapes. I think I set some of them on fire. I listened to him so much. I just kept going over and over. That's what I chose to do. So there were a ton of people that influenced me. And it's like, there's no one person. Here's what's interesting. There are a lot of people that I've learned a ton of things, like, don't do that. They are warnings. There's examples are great. So are warnings. There are people, one of the ones that was the hardest was towards the end of my dad's life in 2013. We had a conversation. This is a few weeks before he died. And we sat down up in Alaska and he said, there were so many things that I wanted to do. God, that just hit me. He knew he had weeks to live. And he was talking about regret. He didn't go for it. He lived scared. He played safe and he was out of time. That's how most people live. And they're not living their full experience, their potential. It's bizarre to me, Hans, that you've got humans that live half our potential. There's nothing in the world. There's no species of tree that lives half and says, I'm going to grow halfway up. Like everything does its full potential, except humans. Humans are like, ooh, let's play safe. And so I absorbed all these people. There were so many. I mean, from my martial arts instructors to my therapists to all these people I listened to on tapes. I remember meeting Tony Robbins and I was like, man, this is awesome. I get to meet Tony Robbins. This guy, I remember there was a scene in this movie where Jack Black shakes his hand and he's like, holy crap, it's like shaking a bunch of bananas, because Tony's a big guy. And when I met Tony, I shook his hand and I was like, man, it is like shaking a bunch of bananas. This guy's he's a giant.
He's a giant. I met him in person. Yeah. I thought he would squeeze my hand like it.
And he's super cool. And I was like, Tony Robbins. He's like, hey, how's it going? And it was funny because he gave me a bunch of crap. He's like, I thought you were like, aren't you? It was a network marketing company I was with. And I'd only joined like 5 months earlier and I just happened to be doing pretty well, but there were people that were way ahead of me. And he's like, why aren't you at their level? I was like, damn, hi, Tony. Thanks for making me feel really small. And so that was the thing. It's like, was my potential where I was? I was ahead of most people, but was I really in my potential? So like, it was this moment where I had this, reminder, am I really going all out or am I just going and it's more than most people? So I think anybody that we had these interactions with, we could be pissed. I could say, Tony Robbins is a jackass. He was mean to me. Or I could say, he was right. That was really important. I needed to remember that and not go into cruise control just because I'm ahead of other people. I need to really think about my own potential and be in competition with myself.
And this is a really crucial one, that like potential, that's the only thing we should chase. Our own potential, never competition or other people. Don't look up, don't look down, don't go left, don't go right. Like maybe for inspiration, but not for comparison. Like the only thing to chase is our own potential.
I couldn't agree more. We tend to look around and we compare ourselves. There's always going to be somebody more attractive. There's always going to be somebody with more money. And it's a never ending game. There's always going to be somebody with a shinier car or a bigger boat. And when you do that, it's a never ending spiral towards hell. Like it's a miserable experience. When you talk about your own potential, that's what's deeply satisfying. You're on that path. One of my favorite books ever is called Mastery by George Leonard. And it's about, he's a martial artist like me. And it's this idea that when you're on your path pursuing mastery, it's not about getting to a place where you win a gold medal. It's about your process. And so the potential, it's really disconnecting from even potential. It's just saying falling in love with that process of going towards mastery. You're never going to get there. But that journey is this incredible process in life, in the dojo, in business, in your relationship. That when you fall in love with that, everything changes. When you're trying to just have a successful moment, literally life sucks.
Earlier, you mentioned how nature strives, and I think about that a lot when I take walks in nature, and I know you enjoy going to nature too. And it's like when I look at the trees and I see a few fully fledged grown trees, but I see hundreds of saplings striving. And because of their conditions, not all of them make it. I mean, unlike humans, they can't move, but there are only a handful of them actually become full-fledged trees, and only a few of them actually get decades and decades, if not hundreds of years old. But humans can do the same thing, just they have the benefit. We are able to move to the sun. We're able to move to the more fertile grounds, We're able to move where the nutrition and the circumstances are such that we too can reach our potential, unlike a tree, maybe.
It always fascinates me to hear people say, well, I came from a really bad childhood, or I came from a bad part of town. Or people will say, well, it's hard for them because they came from this really bad area in the city. And my question is, are they in jail, or are they choosing to be there? Because I'm pretty sure if you're not in prison, you have the right to move around and do things, and you're not stuck as a tree is where it's planted. Like I just had a bunch of trees planted in my backyard, and out of 28 trees, 8 of them are dying, and they didn't have a choice. It just didn't work. The other 21 or 20 are doing good, but they're unlike humans. If we're dying, we can move. If we're in a bad relationship, we can leave. And people go, no, I need to stay here. Why? You think about people that are in abusive relationships. Why do they stay there? Because it's a known. The unknown, the boogeyman, is what scares people into staying put and sitting there rotting, dying like the trees in my backyard instead of getting up. I think these trees could potentially be saved if they could move and go somewhere else. They were fine in California, but then they moved to Arizona and now they're dying. So apparently Arizona was not where they were supposed to be. But regardless, people, like you said, have that choice. They can get up and move. They can get out of the relationship. They can move on. People stay in jobs. They do work that they shouldn't be doing when it's come, it's fulfilled, it's cycle, whatever it is. They stay because it's predictable. We like certainty, but it's not the only one of the human needs. There is variety, there's significance, but we get so wound up about security and predictability that we stay in a life that's our past. And instead of saying, well, wait, what's the rest of our life? We say, no, I want to keep what I know. And that's kind of embarrassing, quite frankly.
Mm-hmm. The prison is in here, and it's not an actual physical prison.
Right.
Well, Damion, thank you so much. This has been truly insightful and like way beyond just real estate. And where can people connect with you, potentially see where Frametec is growing, reaching out to you, connecting, investing?
Best thing to check out is Frametec, frametec.com. Visit, check out what we're doing. I mean, I think it's a really cool thing to see and to see what we're doing. You're going to bump into me there, and you'll bump into me on LinkedIn, but watching what Frametec is all about and seeing how it's impacting business, construction, seeing what it looks like to build something. I think we're so used to seeing all these things that are being torn apart and torn down and breaking people apart. What Frametec is, it's a positive outlook for the future, and it represents that. So I hope everybody will go check Frametec out. And if you happen to be in Arizona, come by and see it live. It's one of the coolest things that you'll ever see in your entire life, walking into the future of manufacturing and home building, solving this giant problem. So that's what I hope people will do. Go check it out and connect with me. And I hope everybody got some good value in these minutes with you.
I might just pick you up on that one next time I go to the Grand Canyon. I'll stop over.
Please do. Love it. I'd love to show you this thing. It's really remarkable. And every time somebody walks in there, their mouth hits the ground. It's like they've never seen it. And they don't. It's hard to imagine. This 2 years ago, this thing was on a napkin. A year ago, it was just some concrete. And now we have robots spinning around doing things and building housing and solving a huge problem for society.
Thank you for joining us at The Path to Wealth. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. Check out our upcoming guests and be sure to share it with all your friends and family that want to take their life to the next level of wealth.